Beneath the cracked facade of an abandoned warehouse on the city's forgotten east side, a narrow stairwell descended into darkness. Dr. Amelia Harper paused at the bottom, the hiss of steam and the low drone of power converters washing over her like distant thunder. Her black lab coat was smudged with gray dust. Her braided hair was pinned back to keep it from tangled in cables. She switched on her wrist light, its beams slicing through the gloom, to reveal concrete walls pocked with age and reinforced with steel girders. At the corridor's end, a thick blast door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of red and amber light bleeding through the seam. Amelia slipped inside and was greeted by a dizzying array of equipment. A ring of particle detectors arrayed around a cylindrical reactor chamber, banks of monitors flickering with streams of data, and an accelerator loop humming with contained energy. The air smelled of ozone and coolant. Amelia crossed the grated metal floor to the main console, where graphs and readouts scrolled rapidly across 8 screens. One graph, labeled EM field intensity, spiked erratically, its yellow line lurching toward a jagged red zone. A warning banner flashed. Critical threshold reached. Her heart pounded as she tapped commands on the touchpad. Data log timestamps blinked. 3 seconds, 2, 1, then frozen. She leaned in, reading the small type error code. Unauthorized run state, override. Swallowing, Amelia keyed her secure line. Detective Carter, she whispered into the tiny speaker. Her voice echoed through the empty chamber. You need to see this. Now. For a heartbeat, only the reactor's hum answered. Then, through the crackling line, Dr. Harper? This is Detective Ryan Carter. I'm on another scene. His tone was polite but distant. Amelia's instincts flared. If the magnetic field collapsed, the containment could breach, and the explosion would level this entire district. She swallowed her fear and pressed on. They've gone into override. Reactor stability is compromised. If you don't authorize an emergency shutdown, a click, then a sigh. Amelia, I have a homicide in progress. Her jaw set. If you don't get here in 15 minutes, I swear. She cut the line and turned back to the console. The yellow line was now dancing on the brink of red, energy building to a point she had only modeled on paper. Deep underground, with no one but herself between controlled science and uncontrolled disaster, Dr. Amelia Harper prepared for the moment when skepticism would give way to chaos, and only Detective Carter's arrival could tip the balance between catastrophe and containment. Dawn broke over the city just as Detective Ryan Carter shuffled through case files in his cramped precinct office. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the stale scent of coffee mingled with the paper's musty ink. Carter rubbed his temples. Homicides, missing persons, and a stack of subpoenas demanded his attention. His phone buzzed insistently on the edge of his desk. He glanced at the caller ID. Dr. E. Harper, Lab. He sighed, pressing the answer button. Detective Carter. Detective, Amelia's voice crackled urgently. The accelerator core in the underground lab is in override mode. The field intensity just hit 98% of critical. If you don't authorize scram, Carter cut her off with a weary grunt. Dr. Harper, I've got a murder scene downtown. Victim's face blown off. Hardly the time for science fiction. He leaned back, eyes narrowing at the incoming homicide report on his screen. But the safety interlocks are locked out, Amelia pressed. If the field surpasses 100%, the containment could rupture. Listen, Doc, Carter said, voice flat. I'll check in when I can. Meanwhile, pull the cord yourself if you have to. He hung up, already typing notes. Alone, Amelia stared at her blank console. The yellow line on her portable readout wavered still at 98%. She jabbed the emergency shutdown button, but a red error flashed. Access denied, awaiting detective authorization. Her breath caught. 15 seconds passed. 99%. 100%. In his office, Carter leaned forward to email a witness list. Unaware that a far more explosive event was creeping toward detonation beneath the city he'd pledged to protect. Late that night, the underground laboratory was bathed in the eerie glow of status lights and monitor readouts. Rows of servers hummed in low unison, their fans kicking up cool drafts that rustled the edges of scattered printouts. A single emergency lamp bathed the central reactor chamber in crimson, its soft pulse casting long shadows across the grated metal catwalks. Dr. Amelia Harper stood alone at the main console, eyes flicking between alarms and readouts. The EM field intensity graph now hovered at 99.3%, its yellow line trembling on the brink of the critical red zone. A digital countdown, 000027, blazed on a secondary monitor, marking the time since the override lock had activated. She tapped at the touchscreen with urgent precision, fingers dancing across virtual buttons. Override protocol. Engage manual release, she hissed into the console, but the screen flashed back. Access denied, authorization required. Heart pounding, Emilia keyed an emergency hatch release, hoping to vent excess energy safely. Instead, a disembodied voice buzzed through the intercom. Warning, structural integrity at 64%. Evacuation recommended in T-minus 15 seconds. She lunged for the emergency shutoff lever, a physical failsafe, but her gloved hand slipped on a ribbon of coolant mist pooling on the floor. The lever caught on debris from a recent maintenance run and refused to pull. At T-minus 10, the whine of the reactor grew sharp, an organ scream in the silence. Amelia backed away, boots skidding, and hit her shoulder against a control panel, sending sparks arcing into the dark. The console's lights flickered erratically. With 7 seconds to go, she found the manual release circuit breaker behind the panel. Wrench in hand, she pulled the heavy switch free, but the circuit glowed fault, and the breaker tripped with a deafening buzz. At 3 seconds, the air itself seemed to constrict. Emilia's chest tightened as the safety doors behind her slammed shut with hydraulic force, locking her in. She pounded the door release button. The intercom crackled. Authorization override required by detective. As the countdown hit 0, the reactor chamber bloomed in blinding white light, filling the lab with a shockwave of energy. Alarms converged into a deafening roar. Emilia braced herself against the console, eyes squeezed shut, as the containment gave way to uncontrolled power, igniting a cataclysm that would forever alter both her world and Detective Carter's. An incandescent roar erupted at the heart of the reactor chamber the instant the countdown struck 0. The containment vessel, a cylindrical shell of reinforced titanium, shuddered under the overwhelming magnetic flux. Monitors screamed red alarms, their screens fracturing into a kaleidoscope of static. A seismic shockwave ripped through the grated catwalks, wrenching loose cables and hurling tools into the air. Dr. Harper was thrown off her feet as the reactor's core breached its shielding. A blinding column of white-hot plasma flared upward, incinerating everything in its path with a hissing cascade of superheated steam and ionized gas. The ceiling above buckled, steel girders twisting like molten taffy, concrete walls cracked in living fractures, spalling chunks of debris onto the floor below. Sparks flew as live electrical conduits arced across the lab, pulsing with lethal energy. The air filled with the acrid stench of burning insulation and ozone. Alarm sirens melded into a single deafening howl that resonated in Emilia's ears. She slammed her arms over her head as a secondary blast rocketed through the corridor, glass from nearby control panels shattering around her in razor-sharp shards. Blinded by the plasma's radiance, Emilia stumbled backward, her boots skidding on a slick of spilled coolant. A large piece of ceiling debris crashed mere inches away, sending dust and rubble cascading like a miniature landslide. She lunged for a handrail, fingers scraping against jagged metal, and hauled herself up as the lab's emergency lighting flickered on in staccato bursts of orange. Through the haze of smoke and dust, Emilia saw the reactor chamber's rear wall peeling outward, like the petals of a mechanical flower opening violently, and felt the lab's ventilation systems groan as they attempted to vent the excess pressure. The roar subsided into a low, menacing rumble as the core's plasma dissipated into the safety buffers. But the devastation remained. Overturned carts, ruptured piping gushing coolant, and scorch marks tracing the paths of flying projectiles. Coughing, Emilia forced herself to her feet, disoriented and singed. Her lab coat was torn, and flecks of debris clung to her hair. She staggered toward the emergency exit sign, the floor vibrating underfoot. Each step was a battle against vertigo and pain as she navigated the labyrinth of twisted metal. At the threshold, she pressed her hand against the release panel. It glowed crimson. Emergency exit denied. A final cruel lock as the reactor's fail-safe doors sealed behind her. Heart hammering, she rapped on the armored door, voice hoarse. "Detective Carter! Detect Carter!" Her plea was swallowed by the lab's groaning structure. Taking a resigned breath, Amelia pivoted to find an alternate route. The corridor beyond lay in darkness, illuminated only by flickering emergency strobes. She could hear the distant report of secondary explosions, gas lines rupturing, small auxiliary generators detonating in sympathetic blasts. The subterranean complex was coming apart. With every ounce of training and resolve, Amelia Harper pressed forward into the smoke-filled corridor, each step carrying her away from the inferno behind and toward a reckoning that Detective Carter would one day regret not heeding. Detective Ryan Carter burst through the heavy blast door into the smoldering corridor seconds after Amelia's desperate knocks. His polished shoes crunched on shattered glass and twisted metal shards, the acrid scent of burning coolant stinging his nostrils. The emergency strobes pulsed crimson along the walls, illuminating scorch marks and drip lines of radioactive coolant that hissed on the concrete floor. He called out, voice echoing, "Doctor! Harper, are you here?" His flashlight beam danced over debris, charred circuit boards, severed cables sparking life's last electric gasp, and overturned tool carts splintered like matchsticks. At the far end, the corridor opened onto the reactor chamber's blast door, warped outward by the explosion's force. Amelia staggered into view, coat torn, face streaked with soot and tears. Carter's breath caught as he saw her shaken posture and the blackened residue on her arms. Guilt surged through him. "Amelia," he began, voice tight, I got your message, but..." His words trailed off as he took in the devastation around them. Flames licked through ruptured coolant lines in the distance, and the secondary vent doors, meant to contain just this scenario, twisted open, spewing superheated steam that billowed like a living thing. Carter snapped on his service radio. "Command, this is Carter. We have a major industrial accident at Sector 7 sublevel. Fire teams and hazmat needed immediately." His tone was authoritative, but his eyes never left Amelia's as he continued, "Why didn't you shut it down yourself?" Amelia shook her head, voice shaking. "I tried. Access denied. You were needed to authorize the SCRAM." Her gaze was a mixture of accusation and relief. "I told you, Detective. I warned you." Carter knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said, voice thick with remorse. "I had a case." But even as he spoke, another blast rattled the corridor, dust raining from the ceiling. Carter helped Amelia to her feet and guided her toward a service ladder hatch marked "Emergency Exit Only." As they ascended, his mind replayed every second he dismissed her call. In the lifeblood of the lab, electronic pulses and controlled fusion, he had valued homicides over a catastrophe. Now, flames and structural collapse bore witness to his error. At the surface door, paramedics and fire crews swarmed in a choreographed frenzy. Carter released Amelia to their care, stepping back as EMTs assessed her for smoke inhalation and shock. He removed his badge and handed it to a senior firefighter as identification, his uniform suddenly feeling incongruous amidst scorched debris. Crouching beside the blast door's wreckage, Carter pressed a gloved fingertip against the warped steel. "You were right," he whispered to the empty corridor, knowing his apology came too late to undo the damage. But as Amelia was led away, helmeted firefighter at her side, Carter vowed his regret would fuel a new resolve. Never again would he ignore the warning of a scientist whose life and expertise were as vital as any detective's badge. Detective Carter sat beside Dr. Harper's hospital bed, the pale morning light filtering through drawn curtains. The room smelled of antiseptic and fresh linen. The steady beep of an IV monitor marked each passing second. Amelia lay supine, her face still smudged with soot, but softened by sleep. A gauze wrap cradled her arm, where minor burns had been treated. Carter cleared his throat, voice low. Amelia, I'm sorry, he began, folding and refolding the edge of his case file. I failed you. I put paper over a life, he said, eyes on the white ceiling. I've already briefed internal affairs. We're opening an inquiry into the lab's emergency authorization procedures. No one should have to wait on me again. Amelia stirred, eyelids fluttering. She focused on Carter's earnest expression. Thank you, she whispered, voice raspy. But it's more than procedure. I've drafted a new shutdown protocol. Automated, multi-tiered, with fail-safe overrides tied to critical thresholds, not a single individual. She slid a sheaf of printed flowcharts and pseudocode across her bedside table. Carter examined the diagrams. Layered authorization tokens, biometric verifiers, and an emergency break glass function that bypassed all but the most catastrophic conditions. This is brilliant, he said, tracing the lines with a finger. We'll get this to the fire marshal and the city safety board today. He tapped his badge. My precinct will partner with your department to test and enact these measures. Over the next 12 hours, he convened meetings with lab directors, city engineers, and legal advisors, each time speaking of Dr. Harper's courage and the urgent need for change. Amelia, discharged later that afternoon, joined him at the underground lab's control center. Though still bandaged, she stood at the console, guiding Carter through the new protocol simulations. When they activated the emergency brake code, the reactor's status light shifted from amber to flashing green. Authorized shutdown engaged, and the countdown halted instantly. Systems powered down in an orderly sequence, valves closed, and energy levels fell to safe standby. No alarms blared, no doors locked them out. Carter exhaled, relief and pride mingling in his voice. That's the difference between life and death, he said, offering Amelia a grateful nod. She allowed herself a tired but triumphant smile. As they emerged from the lab into the cool dusk air, Carter placed a hand on her shoulder. Your warning saved us, he said quietly. Amelia's shoulders relaxed for the first time since the blast. Together they walked toward the stairwell, detective and scientist united by a shared vow, never again to let bureaucracy eclipse the imperative to protect every life. 2 weeks later, City Hall's grand chamber buzzed with anticipation as commissioners, department heads, and press filled the oak-paneled room. A banner overhead proclaimed Emergency Science and Safety Summit. At the front, a long dais held nameplates. Dr. Amelia Harper, Detective Ryan Carter, Fire Chief Sandra Liu, and Mayor Thomas Caldwell. Amelia stood at the podium, her forearm still bearing a faint burn scar, her lab coat replaced by a tailored navy blazer. Beside her, Carter adjusted his tie, badge clipped to his jacket, eyes bright with purpose. Behind them, large screens displayed the flowchart of their new automated shutdown protocol. Layers of sensors, biometric overrides, and fail-safe break glass functions. Mayor Caldwell rapped the gavel. Welcome, he began, voice resonant. Today we enact groundbreaking measures to protect our city's scientific endeavors and our citizens. I present Dr. Amelia Harper and Detective Ryan Carter, whose partnership turned near disaster into a blueprint for the future. Amelia stepped forward, clicking a remote. The screen flicked to life, a simulation of the reactor's energy curve, now fully contained under the new protocol. She spoke steadily. Our system continuously monitors field intensities. Upon reaching 95% of threshold, automated alerts dispatched to multiple safety officers. At 98%, the system auto-engages a controlled scram. No single manual override needed. Each term was punctuated by animated diagrams, valves closing, magnetic fields collapsing safely, and emergency exits unlocking instantly. Next, Carter took the podium. From the moment I ignored Dr. Harper's warning, I understood that protocol cannot rely on one person's availability, he said, turning to face her. That lapse almost cost lives. Now, law enforcement, fire, and medical teams share real-time access to these systems, ensuring any authorized responder can act immediately. He tapped a dashboard on his tablet, showing live token authentication logs and emergency response times. Fire Chief Liu rose to her feet. We've integrated these protocols into our dispatch systems, she stated. When an emergency shutdown is triggered, fire and EMS are automatically alerted with precise location data. We'll arrive within minutes, every time. She nodded to her uniformed officers seated behind, who stood and offered a crisp salute. Mayor Caldwell smiled, looking at both Amelia and Carter. In honor of their work, I sign this ordinance, establishing the Citywide Science Safety Authority, which will oversee all high-risk research sites. Their first directive: implement these protocols across every laboratory and pilot facility in our jurisdiction by year's end. Applause rippled through the chamber as Caldwell affixed his signature to the plaque on the lectern. Amelia and Carter clasped hands, scientist and detective unified by respect forged in crisis. As cameras flashed and reporters jostled forward, the pair stepped off the dais, shoulders squared and hearts lightened by the knowledge that their regret and collaboration had rewritten the rules of public safety. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky, and in laboratories beneath the streets, new systems quietly stood ready, guarding both scientific ambition and human life under the shield of lessons learned too nearly the hard way.